Why do Jews dip bread into salt at every meal? Have you ever been to a meal where you would find that as soon as the blessing is made over bread, we take the bread, we dip it into salt? What is our obsession with salt? That every meal that we eat bread, we dip the bread into salt. So what is the secret of salt? What is the meaning of salt? That it is observed till this very day. Well, when we look back in history, we look in the Bible, very interestingly, the concept of salt is mentioned many of times. We begin with, in the beginning in Genesis, when we talk about the wife of Lot, when she was instructed not to turn around and look at Sodom and Gomorrah's destruction. When she did, she turned into a pillar of salt. If you have ever been to Israel and you have ever descended, and the reason why I use the expression descended is because Jerusalem is one of the highest areas above sea level. The Dead Sea is the lowest below sea level in the world. When you travel from Jerusalem to the Dead Sea, you are traveling a journey which is the only place in the world that you could go from the highest above sea level to the lowest of below sea level. The Dead Sea is an amazing phenomenon which is in Israel, and anyone who has had a chance to have gone to the Dead Sea. And the reason why it's called the Dead Sea is because nothing can survive in the sea because of its high salt content. As a matter of fact, there are so many minerals that are driven from this high salt content. There are many creams and many ointments that are produced from the Dead Sea that is so beneficial for health purposes. So what is it about salt that takes such prominence? If we look further in the Bible, when God made a covenant with Abraham, the founder of Judaism, the forefather, God said, I will make with you a covenant of salt. Brit Melach, a covenant of salt. And further on in the Bible, the Torah, the Bible teaches us that whenever you bring a sacrifice, you bring salt. And here we have it. Salt is brought at every sacrifice on the altar. So let's bring that to nowadays. Why do we dip bread into salt at every meal? The reason is because when a person sits down to eat food, a person is not just eating food because they are hungry and they want to satiate their hunger pangs. But if a person looks beneath the veneer of this concept, why do we eat? Why are we eating 3 meals a day? Why did God create us to have to eat? We cannot exist without food or water. But why are we eating and drinking? Why did God create our bodies to be so needy and dependent on its own existence, on food, air, and water? The answer is because we are not just bodies who are existing just to exist, but rather we are on a mission. We are on a journey. God took a soul from heaven, put it in our bodies, created us, put us on this world, not just to come and go and eat, sleep, and drink and die. That's not our journey. But rather, God embarked on each one of us on a journey to be His ambassador, to transform the world, to turn this world from physical to spiritual. Part of that transformation is processing food. God created our bodies to be needy so that it can take the apple, it can take the food, and we transform it from material into energy. The food that we eat gives us our energy. But we're not eating just to be gluttonous individuals who are just satisfying the desires of our bodies. It's rather a spiritual existence, a spiritual experience. So that when we sit down to eat, it is in the Jewish law that before we actually eat a sandwich, we eat bread, we wash our hands. Not because they're dirty. We wash our hands because we're getting ready for a spiritual experience. We're getting ready to turn our table into an altar. We're getting ready to take the food that's on this altar and to elevate it, to transform it into energy. So this is a spiritual experience. I'm washing my hands because I am about to do something very holy, just like it was done in the times of the temple. And just like in the times of the temple, they would put salt on every altar for every sacrifice. So now that our table has become an altar, we are about to eat food that is our sacrifice. We take the food and we dip it into the salt, just like it was done on the altar. That is why we dip the bread into the salt, to remind us that the food that we're eating, yes, it's delicious. A lot of hard work went into making the food. But remember, why are we eating? So that we should get energy. What do we do with the energy is to be able to truly do good with the world. We don't live to eat. We eat to live. It's not about a human being. It's about being human and realizing that our whole life and existence is for doing good for others. Have you ever heard the expression, gosh, you're like the salt of the earth? That is a compliment. Why is that? Because God created the nature of salt. Salt never spoils. Salt never spoils. As a matter of fact, for generations, they used salt as preservatives. That's how they preserved food, was with salt. Salt, not only does it never decay or disintegrate or spoil, it's a preservative. God made the covenant of salt as a lesson that His covenant will last forever, just like salt is. When they say a person is like the salt of the earth, means that they are consistent, that they are like this for life. They're not just judged by a specific moment, event, and act, but they are real. They're consistent. They are like the salt of the earth that never spoils. And that is the concept of having salt at the table. As a matter of fact, salt actually makes some foods so tasteful. Within its limits, we know too much sodium is not healthy. But sometimes you can take a plate of food, and it's very bland. You add a little bit of salt, all of a sudden it tastes amazing. Just a little bit of salt. It's the memory, it's the thought, it's the awareness of God's covenant with us. God gave us salt that we should use, and we use it throughout our whole life. But the next time you pick up the salt shaker, think of it for a second. Think of, wow, this is a product that lasts forever. This is a product that's going to make my food delicious. But this salt came from God, so that for us to remember that God made a covenant for us forever and ever. And that covenant will never be broken, as the salt will never spoil. Our commitment to God needs to be in the same. So it's not just once in a while, but as we eat food, as we go through our day, when you lift up that salt shaker, remember your commitment to God will also not spoil. Your commitment to God will be a preservator, as salt is a preservator. And that's why we are so obsessed with salt. Regardless of our blood pressure rising from all the salt that we eat. But when we take salt in its right portions and we don't indulge or overdo it in a healthy way, we keep our bodies healthy. It will keep our minds healthy. So now we understand the importance of salt. There was a time even once that it was used as a currency. That's how valuable salt was. But nowadays, salt is so readily available. But the lesson is eternal. The lesson is a lesson for us to always remember that our love to God is eternal, is unbreakable. God's love to us is eternal and unbreakable, and will be as preserved as salt preserves food. Salt will preserve our relationship to God forever. God bless you. God loves you.